Hello and welcome back to our CAEL language series. Today we're going to continue working on our listening skills. This is going to be our third practice in this particular series working on our listening skills. Now, before we get to our practice questions today, there are a few things that I'd like to review about the listening test on CAEL in general. So first of all, it's an academic test, so we will be listening to an academic lecture. The audio only ever plays once. There's no pause, there's no opportunity to replay. So what that means then is that we have to be listening very carefully as that lecture is playing. We need to train our ears to focus on the words and ideas that we do understand and to just let go of any words that maybe we don't understand. Keep your ear moving in live time with the speaker. Now, there might be a question or two that you're a little bit unsure of, but we encourage you always to guess as a last resort. Please don't leave any questions blank. If you're lucky, you'll guess correctly and you could still earn a point for that question, which will help to maximize your score overall. You'll never lose marks for guessing incorrectly, so really you've got nothing to lose there. Now, all of the listening sections on CAEL will be completed in the same three-step format. The first thing that's going to happen before we even listen is we'll be given a short amount of time to get familiar with the questions and the answer choices. This is called previewing those areas. The goal here is to become familiar with the keywords so that we know exactly what to listen for once the speaker begins. Once the time clock for the preview time reaches 0, the lecture is going to automatically begin to play. So our goal now is to try to answer as many questions on the computer screens as we can while we're listening. There's a little bit of multitasking then involved here. Once the lecture finishes, we will have a prescribed amount of time as well to review the answers at the end. So this is our opportunity to go back and finish answering any questions we may have missed, and also to double check that we're happy with the answers. Whatever we have submitted for the answer choices, when the clock reaches 0, that's what's going to be submitted for marks. So please be happy with it before that happens. Again, I emphasize this as it's an important point. Because we're going to be so busy answering the questions while the speaker is talking, we won't have a lot of time to take detailed notes while that audio plays. Instead, what you might want to do is after you've reviewed the answers and you've made sure everything's complete, you may have a little bit of time left off on the clock. So this is an opportunity, if you wish at this point, to have a look at the questions and answer choices you've selected. You might want to note down some of the key terms and ideas. Remember, on your CAEL test, some of these listening questions will come into play in future questions. So there will be times where you'll be asked to speak about what you've learned in a long listening passage. And sometimes too, you'll be asked to use the long listening to help you write out an essay. So you could take a few short notes there in that review time, but I caution you against doing that while you're listening, because the fear is, of course, is that you won't have time to finish answering the questions. So here's what a typical screen would look like on the actual CAEL test. You'll notice that the prep time clock is always located here on the left of the screen. So this is going to count backwards to 0 as soon as you begin the listening test itself. So during this prep time, this is where you'll focus your attention on the right-hand side of the screen where you see all the questions and the answer choices. So you'll notice if you have a long listening passage, you'll have several screens of questions to complete. There are around 11 questions or so for a long listening passage. And we can't display 11 questions on one computer screen. So that's why right now we are on page or screen number 1, which is why that number 1 is highlighted. And we can see here the first 2 questions on the test. To navigate to the second screen, we only need to click on page number 2 at the top, and that would move us along and so on until we previewed all the screens that are available to us. So again, during this preview time, our goal here is to become familiar with what the questions and answer choices are all about, so we know what to listen for next. So we're going to do that now because today in this episode, we're going to practice answering 3 questions about a lecture that I'm going to play for you. So let's demonstrate then how you would use your prep time wisely in order to become familiar with these keywords. So starting with question 1, we can see it says, according to the passage, how would the construction of a traffic tunnel benefit Ellisdale? So at some point in the lecture, the speaker should mention a traffic tunnel, and then we would be listening carefully for the benefits to the city. You'll notice this question specifically tells us to choose two answer choices. And you'll also notice here that in front of each answer choice, we've got a square. The square is a visual reminder to us, the test taker, that more than one answer is needed here. So because the instructions tell us to choose two, in order to earn a point for this question, we would have to make sure both of the choices we make are correct. So again, during this prep time, you would quickly skim read over those answer choices, again, just to tuck them into your memory so you know what types of ideas to listen for shortly when the speaker begins. So the benefits here would include possibly attracting tourists, lowering taxes, lightening the flow of traffic, shortening driving time, or creating more local jobs. So again, two of those answers will be mentioned by the speaker very shortly. The second question says, with which statement would residents most likely agree? You're going to notice here some key words. Most likely. These are signal words to us, the reader, that this question is an inference question. So what that means here is that these four answer choices will not be stated directly inside the lecture itself. Instead, what we have to do is listen to the speaker and try to determine or draw a conclusion about which of these ideas would be most attractive to the residents. What would they probably agree with? So our answer choices here would be either to build a toll bridge, maintain the current tax rates, discourage tourism, or ask the government to cover most of the costs. So in this case, only one answer would be correct because we can see those little circles in front of the answer choices. And also the instructions don't tell us to choose more than one. So we know that this is just a typical multiple choice. And one of those answers is going to be the best choice. And that's going to depend on what we learn as we listen shortly. So again, during the prep time, in this case, we've looked at the first two questions. So we would click on screen number 2 at the very top here, and you can see we're now on to question 3. Again, on a long listening passage for CAEL, you'd have around 11 questions. But today we're only going to do 3 practice questions, which is why we only see question number 3 here, and then that's it. So this question says, according to the passage, how might tunnel construction negatively affect the environment? So in the lecture, we have to listen for something to do with the environment. And of course, we're listening for a negative effect. So ideas here at a quick glance deal with losing green space, having the river's ecosystem becoming less diverse, having drinking water becoming unsafe. And also it says here that small animals might lose their natural habitats. So again, we have to listen for one of those ideas. And again, you'll notice in this question, just as it was in question 1 earlier, it says here, according to the passage. So those are signal words to us, the test taker, to let us know that the answer itself is going to be stated somewhere within the passage. This is not an inference question. We don't have to guess what the best possible answer will be. So at some point, the speaker is going to give us one of these answers to explain what the negative impact on the environment would be. Now, the words from the answer choices might be differently worded in the speech. We have to be aware of that. So we can't always just listen for direct words or direct matches. Oftentimes we'll hear synonyms or paraphrased ideas, but it's the same idea that we're listening for in order to match up with one of these answer choices. So again, you would use your prep time to get through as many questions as are presented to you. On a short listening passage on CAEL, there will only be about 3 questions. But again, on a longer passage, you have approximately 11 questions to navigate. And you'd have more prep time, of course, too, in the longer sections. So once that prep time finishes, this is what you will see. Right now, instead of a time clock, we see a little blue bar. And on the real test, this blue bar is actually going to move from the left of the screen all the way over to the right. So this actually counts as the timer. And once that blue bar fills up all of that remaining white space, the lecture will be finished. So again, it's just a visual clue to us to let us know how much more speech is going to be heard so that we can answer all of our questions. You'll notice that the word above that blue bar says playing. So again, we don't have to do anything. The lecture just starts automatically as soon as that prep time clock reaches 0. So this is what we would see. So I'm going to play a part of this lecture now for all of us, and we're going to use what we're listening to practice answering these 3 questions that we just previewed together. Now, on the real test, you'd actually be clicking right on the computer screen to fill in your answer choices. Clearly, we can't do that today while we practice. So instead, what I'd encourage you to do is perhaps pause this video right now and go collect a paper and pen so that at least you can mark down what you believe the correct answer choices to be. After we've listened, we will take it up and we'll make sure that we all understand where the answers have come from. Okay, so I'm going to play this part of the lecture right now. Here we go.
Everyone, let's settle in after our short break and finish our lecture series about urban infrastructure in the city of Ellisdale. We've already discussed the environmental and financial impacts that would result if a new bridge was constructed to ease traffic congestion in and around Ellisdale. Now, we're going to examine the same factors, but as they relate to a new traffic tunnel instead of a bridge. This should provide enough information for you to decide which structure would best suit the needs of this city. Remember, Ellisdale is located on an island in the Kentworth River system. Although 6 bridges currently connect Ellisdale to the mainland, traffic congestion has increased significantly over the past 60 years. To ease congestion, government officials have proposed 2 plans. They'd like to either build a new bridge, which we discussed earlier, or construct a traffic tunnel beneath the seabed between the island and the mainland. Let's examine this second proposal in more detail now. Since tourism is a major industry in Ellisdale, the government would like the new structure to appeal to tourists. Local politicians believe that the novelty of driving through a traffic tunnel constructed beneath the seabed will increase the number of visitors to the city and support the local economy. Costs of construction, however, are high, with recent estimates at $1.7 billion. To offset construction costs, officials have promoted the idea of traffic tolls. If drivers use the tunnel, officials argue, they will have to pay for it. Officials also state that tolls will prevent a tax rate increase for Ellisdale residents. As you can imagine, residents are happy to avoid paying more taxes, but they strongly feel that the government should cover the full cost of construction and oppose the idea of traffic tolls. Cost is not the only factor that must be considered before construction can begin. Environmental impacts must also be examined. Smaller land mammals like rats, mice, and rabbits that live along the river's edge could be displaced by the tunnel construction. This may cause these rodents to search for new places to live within the city, which could lead to pest control problems. Electricity and water service disruptions may also occur as a result of construction.
Okay, so that's it. So we're going to leave it at that. At some point during that part of the lecture, we would have heard enough information to answer these 3 questions. So what I'd like to do now is help us out a little bit as we are studying. What I've got here on the left-hand side of your screen is now a transcript of not the entire lecture, but of the parts that are going to give us the answers to these 3 questions. Now, on the real CAEL test, there will never be a transcript. You're simply listening and answering. But again, as we study together, I think it's most helpful that we can all see the words on the screen to help us choose those correct answers. So this is the process that hopefully we went through as we began listening for some of these keywords. So remember, during the preview time, we already identified those keywords in the questions. So the first one was talking about a traffic tunnel and specifically how they benefit the city of Ellisdale. So we were on the lookout, or to listen, I guess, for 2 particular benefits here. So the speaker did mention the traffic tunnel after he introduced the lecture to the class itself. So if you look on the left-hand side at the transcript, that section where the traffic tunnel is first introduced, the first benefit's actually given to us right there. The speaker specifically said, to ease congestion, government officials have proposed 2 plans, and one of which is the traffic tunnel. So when you return your attention now to those 4 answer choices, have a look there at answer choice C. Answer choice C reads that this traffic tunnel would lighten the flow of traffic. So lightening traffic means the exact same as easing congestion. So the idea now in the lecture itself and answer choice C, the wording is different, but the idea itself is exactly the same. So we've already determined now our first benefit. This is why perhaps they would want to construct this tunnel in the first place so that you wouldn't have as much traffic congestion. So we're listening still for our second benefit, and we don't yet have it in that first little paragraph. So the second paragraph, or the continuation of the lecture itself when we were listening, The speaker once again brings up this idea of the traffic tunnel. So that whole part of the lecture, just to jog our memory, says, as you can see, local politicians believe that the novelty of driving through a traffic tunnel constructed beneath the seabed will increase the number of visitors to the city and support the local economy. So that phrase, when you look back again at your answer choices, it directly matches the idea suggested in answer choice A. This is talking about attracting tourists to the region. So again, you'll notice the word tourists was not located in this part of the lecture, but we did see the word visitors. And we were talking about attracting visitors to try out this traffic tunnel as a very unique construction piece. So again, these two answer choices are really strong examples of paraphrased ideas between the lecture itself and the answer choices on the test. So this is a very frequent thing to happen on CAEL. So as a reminder then, it's important for all of us to have a very wide range of vocabulary coming into this test so that we can more easily determine these paraphrased ideas. So as we're listening, as soon as we choose those two answers, we know we're finished question one because we were told that only two answers were correct. So we would just then divert our eyes down to question two. And we're still listening for the key points here. So we'd already determined that we're trying to figure out which of these ideas residents would probably agree with. All right. And again, the four answer choices to refresh our minds here were about building a toll bridge, maintaining taxes, discouraging tourism, or having the government cover most of the costs. Again, an efficient listener, I guess, in this case, would be on the listening out for these keywords to be mentioned so that we can start to come up with our assumption, which idea makes the best sense? What would the residents probably agree with? So returning back again to our transcript, I've gone ahead and raised it up a little bit so that we can see the next couple of sections here in the speech itself. So let's have a look then at that next little part in the transcript itself. So the first word or keyword, I guess, I heard from the speech referring to these answer choices was this notion about traffic tolls. So the speaker was saying to offset the construction costs, officials have promoted the idea of traffic tolls. So it's officials that want the tolls, not the residents. So I don't think answer A is correct. I don't think residents would want this toll bridge to be put up on the island itself. And the speaker continued, if drivers use the tunnel, officials argue they will have to pay for it. Officials also state that tolls will prevent a tax rate increase for Ellisdale residents. As you can imagine, residents are happy to avoid paying more taxes, but they strongly feel that the government should cover the full cost of construction and oppose the idea of traffic tolls. So once again, you can see how all of the answer choice words from A to D most of them anyways, were discussed in the lecture. And I point this out because this is where sometimes it gets tricky. Just because we hear one of the keywords from an answer choice within the speech itself, it doesn't automatically mean that that's the correct answer. And because question two is an inference, we really need to put together all of this information to determine what the best possible idea is. So again, look at the very bottom of that section of the transcript. It says that residents oppose the idea of traffic tolls. So that does it. That confirms it. We can eliminate answer choice A. They certainly would not want a toll bridge built on this island or in the city of Ellisdale. The second idea there talks about taxes, and taxes was mentioned twice, as a matter of fact, in this section. So in the middle part there, officials are saying that they'll prevent a tax rate increase. And also we hear that residents don't want to pay more taxes. So when we think about what that idea is suggesting, and when you look back at answer choice B, it seems to make a lot of sense. It's logical. Answer choice B is all about maintaining the current tax rate. So in other words, residents would continue to pay the same amount in taxes, regardless of this tunnel construction. And that's exactly what this part of the lecture is talking about. Residents are happy to avoid paying more taxes. They don't want to pay more. So then we can assume that they would likely continue to pay the same amount then if they're not going to increase. So answer choice B is looking very promising here. Answer choice C, talking about tourism. Well, tourism wasn't even mentioned in this part of the lecture, so we can eliminate that. The government was mentioned. So answer choice D does say that the government would cover most of the costs. But if you return your attention to the word government in the lecture that we heard, Here, this idea says that the government should cover the full cost of construction. The full cost, not most of the cost, as answer choice D says. So again, through a process of elimination, it looks like then that our hunch was correct. Answer choice B is really the only logical answer here that we can assume based on the information that we've learned about. And that's what an inference question will ask you to do. So we've answered the first two questions. You would then continue on. You would, I guess, click on screen 2 at the top of your page, and you would come up to question 3. So remember, this answer is stated somewhere in the lecture itself. And this is the one that talks about the negative consequences for the environment. So at some point then, our ears are listening for the word environment, or I guess a word that means the same thing as, and it has to be a negative idea. So having a look at your 4 answer choices, we're trying to determine if it has to do with green space being lost, the ecosystem becoming less diverse, drinking water becoming unsafe, or small animals losing their habitats. So as we continue to listen, the speaker did bring up the words or the phrase environmental impacts. So as soon as we as listeners hear that word environmental, we understand that the answer is probably close by. And even the word impact has a negative connotation, almost like a consequence. So this matches what the question's asking us about the negative effect on the environment that would occur should this tunnel be constructed. So again, we continue to listen from that point forward. And as soon as the environment is introduced, we get this notion about smaller land mammals. So right away, you're looking at your answer choices, and you can see that small animals are discussed in answer choice D. So the idea in D talks about these animals losing their natural habitats, losing their homes. And again, we look back at our transcript there, and we heard the speaker tell us that these smaller land mammals, like rats, mice, and rabbits that live along the river's edge, could be displaced by the tunnel construction. This may cause these rodents to search for new places to live within the city, which could lead to pest control problems. So if these small animals or rodents are actually needing to find another home, then clearly answer D is looking like it's probably correct. Small animals would then lose their natural habitats if this construction goes forward. We did finish this part of the lecture, by the way, with this notion or this idea about water. And the passage itself says that water service disruptions could occur. But when we look at the answer choice C that talks about water, the idea there is that the water could become unsafe to drink. So again, even though water is discussed here under the environmental section of the lecture, the idea itself is not accurate. So we could not choose answer choice C, even though water was mentioned. All right. And again, the other 2 ideas don't make sense in this context. We have to find the answer in the transcript or in the listening itself. So answer choice D then is the one that's correct. So these are 3 practice questions just to get us thinking about the process. We spoke about these at good length today because I wanted to highlight the thought process that we're going through as we work independently. You can imagine that in live time as the lecture continues on, it's up to you, the listener, to move forward and quickly make your choices. You won't have time to have an inner dialogue with yourself as we've just done today. But for practice purposes, hopefully you've got some ideas about how you're going to start matching ideas. So let's summarize what we've done here today so you can continue to practice your listening. Remember, you're always going to have a little bit of time to preview your answers first, or the questions, I guess, and the answer choices. And this is really important because this is how you'll know exactly which ideas you're going to listen for. So you'll note those keywords. You'll hear these keywords at some point during the lecture. Sometimes you'll have direct word for word matches. So the language could be the same from the speaker to the questions and answers. But more often than not, you'll likely have synonyms and paraphrased ideas, which is what we saw today in our practice. Your job, again, is to answer as many questions as you can while the lecture is playing. All right. Most of the answers are actually presented in the same order, just as we practiced today. So that will be a little bit of a helpful clue for you as well to keep moving along in live time. Remember, because you are so busy answering these questions as you're listening, this is not the time to take long and detailed notes. If you want to take a couple of notes later on, you're very welcome to do that, but I'd recommend at the review time. So after the lecture has finished, you do have a bit of time left over. to double check your work, make sure everything's answered. And again, if you want to take a few notes, that would be the prime time to do so. Please make sure that every single answer or question rather has been answered. Don't leave anything blank. Again, you could guess very lucky and you might even earn a point for that question, even if you don't know the answer. And since you'll never lose a mark for guessing wrong, you really have nothing to lose. So take a chance and maybe even earn a mark on that section, even if you don't know by guessing. All right, so I'm hoping that you've got some nice listening strategies here that are going to help you continue to prepare for your listening test as you study from home. Join me for our next episode and we will continue our language practice. See you then.